Good morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering natural health on this year Wednesday morning, Rise and Shine. And this morning here, we're looking at a topic, food security and health news. So we're going to cover some, basically 4 different articles here on various different health news, and then we'll kind of end up the last 2 on food security. So welcome again to our live talk program, and hopefully you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on the challenges of this day. And let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you for the blessings of your word. I thank you for the blessings, dear Lord, of the message that you give us in health to be able to always look out for our best interests. May you bless us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. So welcome again. So we're looking here at food security and some health news. So I have 2 different articles to share with you, and then I'm going to move on to the food security part, which is the main thing. So the first little article I'll share with you is just a quick note here on marijuana use. As you know, I'm very clear here that I'm not in belief of the massive onslaught or increase of marijuana. I guess people switched from tobacco and now they're over there in marijuana. And I'll say this: the reason why is that I believe that marijuana is it damages the nerve, or it slows the nerve down, it poisons the nervous system. And so that's one of the main reasons, separately from the other idea of inhaling smoke. But what it does, it tranquilizes the system. And a lot of people are coming out with neurological problems. And hence, I say this up front. So this is a quick article here. Marijuana use doubled in the U.S. pregnant women, especially during the first trimester. Over 7%, or 1 in 14 pregnant women, say they use marijuana in the past month. So pot use, and this is Associated Press here, pot use in pregnancy has doubled among U.S. women and in most common during the first trimester, government research shows. Overall, 7% of pregnant women, or 1 in 14, say they use marijuana in the past month. That's from a nationally representative health survey in 2016-2017, and compares with a little over 3% in 2002-2003. Some studies have linked marijuana use during pregnancy with increased chances of premature birth, low birth weight. Animal studies have linked high dosages early in pregnancy with fetal brain abnormality, but whether typical use in human pose similar risk is unknown, says Dr. Nora Valco, director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse. So I'll just pause here a little bit. So increase, at least in animal tests, they have shown that it typically increase fetal brain abnormalities. So the brain comes up with various different abnormalities, but still, what is already proven in human studies and stuff, so forth, is premature birth and low birth weight. So because we don't know exactly how harmful it is, it's better to err on the side of caution. The study was presented at the medical meeting Tuesday and published online in the Journal of American Medical Association. First trimester use jump from almost 6% to 12%. Many women may have used pot before they learned they were pregnant and use it to ease morning sickness, although few women said a doctor had recommended it. Among women who weren't pregnant, the rate of marijuana use increased from almost 7% to nearly 12%. So it's a 12% across the board, or no, that would be 1 in 8%. 1 in 8 people in comparison to 1 in 14. So I guess some women, after they get pregnant, they pull back from using when they know they're pregnant. The results are based on health surveys involving nearly 500,000 U.S. women who were questioned during a period when rising numbers of state legalized marijuana for medical and recreational use. It's legal in 10 states for both uses, but remains illegal federally. A separate study on marijuana use among pregnant Canadian women published in the same journal adds to evidence suggesting that pot use in pregnancy may lead to premature birth. A journal editorial notes that, like similar previous studies, the Canadian research can't rule out whether other factors that may have contributed. The editorial warns against relying on imperfect data to make judgment about potential harms from marijuana use and said more rigorous research is needed. Valco said U.S. government restriction on marijuana research are very much an issue and have hampered efforts to answer fundamental questions about pot use. So here we have it there that it is more evidence, and as I believe as this increases, the use increases, then basically the evidence will become clearer and clearer. So unlike them who are saying they're using imperfect data, using the data that I've been given, and I can't see the positive benefits of the marijuana use. So because of that, I continue to encourage people here not to use marijuana in any form, shape, or size. So we stick to that reality there as we continue to do this. So before we go to food safety, I have one more article I want to share with you. It's just a side note again on what's happening in the society. So yesterday there was a news of a big drug bust that went down in Philadelphia. And I just wanted to put it out there because, oftentimes when you say certain things, or if I say certain things, a person might hear for the first time, I might not understand why would I say that because of some historical things that have happened in the United States. And here's an example of why I always said that when you look at the historical facts behind drug trafficking, drug sales, that the volume of drugs that was sold and is currently being sold in America and Europe, that volume and the percentage of drug use and drug sale is not reflective of the population that are arrested in the prisons. Right now, if you look at the American prison, it is primarily from the low-income minority black population. But if you look at the drug use and the volume in both pound or kilos and volume in both dollar amount, it was impossible that all the people that were selling drugs, transporting drugs, would be primarily African Americans or people or minorities. Not that they weren't doing it and they should never have been arrested, but it's just the focal point, as you know, historically in America, was to focus their investigation and arrest and apprehension on the black community. And here's another example that when you do your job and just go ahead and arrest who need to be arrested and investigate who need to be investigated, well, across the board, you're going to find that you're going to be arresting just representative of the population. So here's another example. So in this is taken from NBC News, and it was in all major news yesterday. More than 16 tons of cocaine worth up to $1 billion seized in a massive bust in Philadelphia. Federal authorities seized 15,000 kilos of cocaine worth as much as $1 billion at a Philadelphia shipping port, official said Tuesday. A second mate and a crew member have been arrested in the massive bust. There was 16.5 tons of the drugs found in 7 shipping containers late Monday night, officials said. This is one of the largest drug seizures in the United States history, U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, William McSwain, tweeted. This amount of cocaine could kill millions of people. My office is committed to keeping our borders secure and streets safe from deadly narcotics. The street value of all the seized cocaine could be as high as $1 billion, according to the federal prosecutor in Philadelphia. The illicit haul was found aboard a cargo ship, the MSC Guyane, which has traveled from Chile, Panama, and the Bahamas, according to NBC Philadelphia. Federal authorities in Pennsylvania arrested and charged 2 of the MSC Guyane's crew member with intentionally conspiring to possess with the intent to distribute. Homeland Security investigation has filed an arrest warrant affidavit, which details how Ivan Darasevic and Fono Favia Tiasega allegedly coordinated the loading of the cocaine onto the vessel. The court documents say that Durasevic, the crew's second mate, admitted his role in bringing the cocaine on the vessel. It says that he got a call from the chief officer to go to the deck after the vessel left Peru, at which time he saw nets on the port side, left side facing the bow, by the ship's crane. The documents say Durasevic and the approximately 4 other individuals, some wearing ski masks, assisted pushing the net containing blue and black bags of cocaine into the hold and loaded them into containers. Durasevic later told agents that he was paid $50,000 for his role in the scheme. He allegedly told the feds that Tiasa Sega was one of the crew members who helped him load the cocaine. Tiasega allegedly told agents that it was Durasevic who operated the crane that brought on the bales of the cocaine after the MS Gain was approached by 6 separate boats during the night while the ship was sailing between Panama and Coronel. He said an additional 8 boats brought more cocaine as the vessel moved north between Coronel, Peru, and Panama. Agents write that the additional container seals were brought aboard to reseal the containers loaded with cocaine. The court document says that Durasevic arms and hands tested positive for presence of cocaine. The affidavit says that the drugs were found upon search of the vessel in 7 separate shipping containers, as we have reported. The shipping company MSC thanked federal authorities for making the bust. MSC takes this matter very seriously and is grateful for the authorities for identifying any suspected abuse of its service. Unfortunately, shipping and logistic companies are from time to time affected by trafficking problems. MSC has a long-standing history of cooperating with the U.S. federal law enforcement agencies to help disrupt illegal narcotics trafficking and to work closely with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the statement said. Deaths linked to cocaine abuse have been on the rise, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Troubling trends began in 2012 before cocaine-related deaths jumped 34% from 2016 to 2017, the CDC says. U.S. death rate from suicide, alcohol, drug overdose reach all-time high. West Virginia and Hawaii, okay, and then you know that. So this is the thing that's going on. So when we look at this again, if you notice here, more states went. I remember my topic is food safety and healthy news. So I'm doing a healthy news part now. So notice here in 2016, 2017, across the board, there's been an increase in cocaine use, as this article talk about, a 34% rise in cocaine use, 2016, 2017. So those years are very important to note, because also those are the years that more states jump on board to legalize marijuana. So the last few years we've been seeing more and more legalization of marijuana, not just for medicinal use or medical use, but also for recreational use. But also at the same time, we see across the board increase for all drugs. Cocaine, meth is back on the scene, or is rising again, the use and deaths from meth. Opiates, there's no abating that right now. Heroin also. So it's almost like, this is what I'm saying is even though they don't want to come up with a certain conclusion, they're just looking and taking the information as they find it. But as you see the increase in the promotion of marijuana and the legalization. It's almost like it's sending a message to the society that it's all good. It's like the government is keeping your fellow citizens are keeping you away from something that's very positive and good for you, and so we're going to legalize one of them. But by legalizing one, which has its negative, not as all they try to sell it to us, that it's all positive. That there's constantly increase in more drug use, because what I think is a mechanism going on here, from what I've understand over the years of human nature, is that what human nature does is that if you get a person on a drug of whatever form, even mild drugs as tea, caffeine, and then you start to go with your liqueurs and your fruity drinks that are like rum punches, stuff like that. The moment you start a person on this path to living a life where they have to be high to be happy, or they associate positive thing with being high, not high in life, but just high in drugs, it seemed to set off a chain reaction that some people call gateway, and people argue back and forth that this thing or that thing is not gateway. But drugs is drugs, and the moment you have a stimulant in your system, something that either brings you up or brings you down, and you become dependent or like the function that you get from that, the benefits. Well, cocaine is on the table. Everything is on the table. And this is an argument that I've read, I've heard people say, and I believe it. It is just the function of being high. And if the person, to feel good, associate that, their brain start associating, if you want to feel good, and you want to feel nice, you take this thing. Well, they associate that thing. We're like, we're below the angels and above the animals. So that's just part of the problem. We tend to just like, we can be controlled by habits, by things that taste good, things that feels good, and so forth. We develop these. We have an addictive side to us, and nobody's immune from this. All of us, every single human being, whether they like it or not, have an addicted side, and all of us can be that person on the side of the street if we get caught up in the drugs and alcohol, or it's all drugs. So that's important to note. So if you notice here, the deaths have increased because what it is that cocaine is a stimulant. It's an upper, and it will mess with the heart, and it is something that is causing an increase in people having heart failure, and so forth and so on. So that's where the problem is. It is that the society, especially as I say in the last 3 years or so, have gone happy to legalize. And as I said, the more you legalize one drugs, is the more people will use all of the drugs. You see, a lot of people go from alcohol or tobacco to other drugs. If you're smoking already, tobacco, well, what will stop you to smoke marijuana or a vape marijuana? And then what's going to stop you to smoke something else? It's all smoke. It's smoke for high. It's just one is more powerful than the other, but you lose self-control. And then as you lose self-control, you go for the harder stuff. Or the stuff that's going to be more potent. That's all it is. You're just chasing the high. That's what I believe. And that's why I believe it's better to just stay clean and stay away from all forms of stimulants or drugs, things that have an addictive side to it. Whatever you're taking, you should be able to stop. Stop for a week, stop for a month, stop for 6 months. And that's it. If not, then you're in trouble. That's just how I see it. Right? So I just want to share that part to you, dear. And then I'm going to go now to food security. So I have 2 articles I want to share with you, both taken from Mother Jones, and both are dealing with food security. So this food security is an important thought, because some people are already becoming concerned. And these 2 articles I'm going to share is going to share some more information about why people are concerned right now I'm gonna tell you, my concern is not per se fully right now. Is that if one or two more of the domino, so to speak, the domino effect, one or two more of these things fall over, we could be in a real cascading, and probably we're already there. But I've been looking at this, and different people have been asking me what you think, and so I'm going to share two articles here about the food security. So I'm talking about food security. What I'm talking about is the idea that we can survive a certain amount of disasters that are affecting the food before there's a issue, there's a crisis, and that's what I'm talking about. So I know food safety is a proper topic, but our title. But I think you get know what I'm going to talk about. So I'm talking about the whole idea of all the disasters that are happening, and how what my concern is. I'll tell you up front what my concern is and what I want to talk about in the next few minutes. Is that my concern now is if few more things go wrong, it could be some trouble. And the summer is already heating up to not be pretty. So we don't know how it's going to go, if it's going to calm down or if it's going to keep rising. But for now, the rain keep falling. And that's probably a bad thing, but also it's a good thing because the heat creates another problem with the food. So this first article brings you some good information here that, as I say, many people are looking at and are concerned. A bomb cyclone blew up the year's corn harvest. The wettest spring I've experienced in 29 years. That's a statement by a farmer. This is written by Tom Philpott over there in Mother Jones. It's a sunny, hot June afternoon just outside the northwestern Illinois town of Kewanee. And fifth generation farmer Brian Corkill really should be planting by this time of year. He tells me he typically long since done sowing 1,300 acres of corn and soybean. Under normal conditions, corn could be knee-high or a little taller. He says, not this year. He didn't even start planting until May 16th, a day after he usually done. On June 6th, the day of my visit, he had just over half of his corn and none of his soybean in the ground. Corkill is not suffering from procrastination. Rather, he's dealing with climate chaos. Since a massive bomb cyclone storm roared through the Midwest in March, it's basically been 6 weeks straight of rain other than a few dry days. Overall, the wettest spring I've experienced in 29 years of farming. And that's after a volatile winter and a rainy, snowy fall before that. Although he didn't experience flooding, he's about 40 miles east of the Mississippi, which is still overtopping its banks. His land has been deluged with rain. Now he's in a race against time. Under federal crop insurance rule, farms lose 1% of their insurance coverage for each day crops go into the ground after the official final planting date, which varies from state by state and crop. For Illinois corn, that was June 6th. That because late planting corn typically delivers low yield. The entire corn belt, the vast swath of prime farmland that stretch from Nebraska to Indiana, Minnesota to Missouri, is a similarly rain-lashed muddy mess. Overall, as of June 2nd, U.S. farmers had planted just 67% of their corn and 39% of their soybean, according to the USDA. By that rate, they are normally planted 96 and 79% of these two crops, which undergirds our American diet, providing feed for the animals we eat, as well as much of the sweetener and fat in processed food. According to the trade journal AgWeb 2019, the slowest planting season for corn on record. So 2019, March. So this is one of the things where we talk about food safety. It's very important to note. Since they've been keeping record, this has been the slowest planting season on a record for corn. Corn, as I said, is corn oil. Corn is is the corn husk itself, whatever is left over back after you get the oil out, and it's also high fructose corn syrup. So this is a big part of my food, I said processed food. Continue reading here. It says, even with the planting trouble threatening to crimp the fall harvest, corn and soybean price remain locked in a half a decade slump, pushing down by rising competition from Brazil and Argentina, and President Donald Trump's ever volatile trade war with China and Mexico, big buyers of U.S. crop. Put it all together, a global crop glut, dispute with big foreign buyers, and dire planting weather. It makes a series of events that we've never seen come together, says Gary Schnitke, agricultural economist of the University of Illinois, recently told USA Today it's going to be a blow to everyone's financial position. As for his farm, Corkill says that on part of this field, water stood for weeks at a time. Even in the past couple of days, he had to steer his tractor around one or two spots with standing water while planting seeds. In addition, he's finding patches where the soil is just mucky and wet and you can't plant it. He's not just stressed out. He's not stressed about corn and soybean. He's also worried about the fall rain and early snow disruption. Is pushed to plant rye in the fall, a crop he sows after he has harvest corn and soybean. These staple crops provide his year-to-year cash flow, while his rye is about a long-term investment in his soil and a kind of insurance policy against the very kind of heavy storm that have been lashing the corn belt all spring. It's what's known as a cover crop, grown not to harvest and sold, but rather for the service it provides. Planted in fall after the corn and soybean harvest, rye delivers a stand of vegetation that buffers its soil from the impact of storm in the spring, and live roots that hold in place and provide channels for rain to penetrate deep into the earth, reducing runoff and creating a store of water his crop can use later. Corkill's rye also crowd out weeds, meaning he needs to use fewer herbicides later in the season, and when it decomposes, it piles the soil with carbon sequestered from the air. Carbon-rich soil are more resilient to both drought and deluge, both of which are projected to visit the Midwest more often as climate warms. Last fall, Corkill says he had a tight window to plant his rye. Rains began soon after he finished his harvest in October, so we only got a couple of days in the field where we could actually get anything done. Then a foot of snow dropped just after Thanksgiving, and that pretty much ended the fall. As a result, he only got to plant about a third of his rye, leaving the rest of his ground bare. We're standing near one of the fields now, which sports a patchy stand of deep green, waist-high rye. It's patchy, he says, because it didn't get much of a chance to thrive because the winter came early and ultimately gave way to a relentless wet spring. But it is much better than nothing, and on the spot sunny day, he's eager to drop into his truck. Is able to hop into his tractor cab and guide the massive 16-row planter over the field to sow corn into the field. Corkill likes to plant green. He deposits the seed directly into the soil under the live cover crop, which he later kills with a herbicide. That planter looms behind us, loaded with corn seeds and ready to rumble. The reason it's just sitting there is that Corkill, busy hosting a field day for practical farmers in Ohio, a group that promotes sustainable agriculture practice throughout the Corn Belt. There is 17 of us milling about, wrapped while Corkill explained the benefits and challenges of devoting resources to his non-cash crop. Sarah Colson, Strategic Initiative Director of the Practical Farmers of Iowa, tells me that 10 more farmers from around the area have signed up, but given its rare sunny dry day and that's they are way behind, these would-be participants could not afford to be away from their tractors. Cover crops are gaining traction among farmers, but the practice remained very much exception, not the rule. And almost there it says here, in the spring of 2018, most recent data available, fewer than 4% of Illinois and Iowa acres have off-season cover crops. In a future piece, he goes on that he will cover this the benefit of how to deal with the soil. After dinner, Corkill went back out into the field and take advantage of the waning couple of hours of daylight to fire up his tractor. The weather forecast was calling for no rain until Sunday, giving him a window to make up for some lost time. It's going to be a long weekend. So this is one of the things. So I have another article shared in a second here. So this is one of the things that's going on. Why some people are concerned for what's happening with the food, because there's three things going on here, and I'm going to read to you in a second, in a few minutes I should say, fourth thing that's happening that's new, a new development that is a new cause of concern. So there is the bomb cyclone that happened, and if you remember, the bomb cyclone happened in, I think it was March, and in March I think it was Nebraska experienced what they claim in that area there, near Nebraska area. I think it was Nebraska. It mainly happened in, and I remember watching that. I don't know if I'd covered that here, but the bomb cyclone that happened was a massive snowstorm, and it melted and caused flooding, destroyed some dams, and caused flooding in major farm areas, killed how many farm animal, and destroyed how many of what was like hay and stuff like that, where it was stored. Anyhow, it was classified as the largest agricultural disaster in American history, and that was, I think, March. So that's, to me, what started off. So even at that point, you're like, okay, it's a few states, and I think it was Nebraska it was centered around. And you could say, okay, so this is a large country, so you can deal with something like that, but nothing to ignore. Largest agricultural disaster is not anything to ignore. But then after that came the rains and the tornadoes, and the rains, as it says here, has hold up the sowing of corn and soybean, which is two massive crops. Almost anywhere you live in America, probably except for places like California, and I don't even know if probably California too, but Florida and some of the other places. But this is even this area where I live, a lot of soybean, a lot of corn. So anyhow, so you have this massive crops that is being affected by the rain, and the rain has not stopped yet. We're still dealing with day in, day out of rain. The Mississippi is still flooded. Farms are being flooded and just being wiped out for the season. So that's part of the concern here. And as he note here, that you can't do this. So, and why this is so important, say, for the food, is because so much of the food that people eat has soybean, and most of this type of soybean we're talking about is just regular soybean, but I believe all soybeans, organic, regular pesticide, GMO soybeans, all being affected. Same thing with corn, but it is used in so much different processes. As I say, high fructose corn syrup, the corn starch, the feed for the animals, the corn oil, soybean oil. Most of what they use even in restaurants to fry food, deep fry food, is corn oil, is vegetable oil. So it's in large quantity. Then you have the various different feed again from the soybean and all of that. So because of that, that's another problem. So this is creating a problem now where I was reading, I think yesterday or the day before, that I think we're off by, I think, over 10% or more this year already, without anything that's going on. We're down by at least, I think, 1 billion metric ton or something of soybean corn that will not be harvested because the fields are not being planted as, but the fields are just destroyed, at least for this year. So keep that in mind. And so if that's gonna affect, that should affect prices and affect whatever. But then there's a glut in the market, which is another problem because of the increased production of these two crops and other crops coming out of Argentina and Brazil. And so this is another problem that's happening, just but more for the global price. So if the price is not right, then you can start affecting more farmers, and more farmers are going out of business. Then one of the things that's going on is that a lot of foreign investors are coming inside of America and they're buying American farms. And some of it is not being farmed anymore. Some of it is being used for wind farms and diverted for other use. That's a separate story that is going on. As I say, I've been trying to follow quite a few of these things to find out what's happening on the ground. Then, separately from this now, you have this trade war that's going on between China and the president of the United States is the whole country of China with the president. They're fighting a war over tariffs and over the trade deficit that were created by the United States. The United States created this trade deficit by shipping all the manufacturing jobs they could to China to make China create more products and so forth to ship back to America. And so by doing, America created a trade deficit, really like shooting themselves in the foot. I don't know why they did that. I mean, I know why they did it. But, as I cover here, I believe they did it to soak the people in the urban areas, the black people. So anyhow, so that's what happened. So we have this thing going on now. So there's a trade war going on with China. And the American farmers are getting washed away. And then they're losing money because they can't sell their crops. And then most actually the value is dropping because Argentina. So all these different things coming together created problems that we couldn't see or would even see before. And so now this is another problem that's happening. The farmers can't plant their crops in, so that means the harvest is already down. And because of this now, some people are believing that and looking at it, and I'm looking at it also, I'm going to kind of see the problem. But as you know, all the time we create surpluses. So if you're creating a surplus, let's say the surplus was 20%. I'm giving that as an example. So you're creating 20% surplus. And you're off by, say, 10%. There's no problem yet. But if you get to 20%, then they start becoming a problem because you don't have any backup. Now, where my issue coming is not that, is that we're in the beginning part of the summer. And with the summer comes the heat. Now, last year the heat had created a lot of problem for the farming in California. So if you remember a few years back, California, just a few years ago, California was in a drought situation. Then the rain started coming, and now, all the vats are, filled. But this last year, they had the fires. And this year, they started out with heat waves over there. And then if there's heat waves over there, then they could start back with a problem with the fires again. 2 years in a row, and you start to talk about you can start affecting farming. And as you know, California is one of the big producers of a lot of the food we eat, in the Midwest and so forth. As he says, Nebraska, Illinois, Missouri, that area, Indiana, in that box right there in the middle of the country. A lot of soybean, corn, and that type of crops, wheat. But over in the other side, when I think about all the food that I eat, it's coming from Florida and California. And so that becomes a problem when you start having these fires. But if you have a 1 year problem, you always have fires over there. But the fires last year were humongous. And they were on quite a few of the fires, made it to the top 10, top 5 list of fires, damaging and size of the fires in American history. So just think about it. If you look at the top 10 fires that has happened in America since they started keeping record, I think 7 of them happened in the last 3 years. That's significant, and that's going to start affecting food. So this is why I'm talking about this. So that's one thing. And then last year, one of the things that had affected, you know, negative impact is the hurricanes. So those two. So up until the next article I'm going to read, I was just saying, okay, I'll keep looking at this. I probably won't even talk about this. And I said, no, I better talk about it before anything has happened, because you need to be aware of what's going on, just in case you haven't been looking at this. That the next thing I was worried about is what happened what happened if there's some massive fires that affect the farms over in California, and then 1 or 2 hurricanes. That would create, now that would be like, okay, it would be easy to wipe out the other 10-15%, because if you go online, use search it, you see what I'm saying, that we're down, I think, in the teens, we're more than 10% off from food production. And as I said, there's always a surplus. So there's not a problem until you start probably hitting about 20% or so. And then you start having a problem, because now you start running into a deficit. You have to go into storage. And then now the next article I read, I said, oh man, there's a new problem. So this is where it is that we're at that point where 1 or 2 new problem could really create a crisis. But right now you go on the major media, it's little talk or no talk. Not so much talk about, they're just talking about the farmers being affected, not the food supply, which is a good thing. But here, as I say, it to me, the more information I look at, the more it could get closer, because as I said, the rains keep coming, and the rains keep coming, the wetness will not work for planting, because most fields are farming are done on the flatlands, which is easily flooded. All right, so keep that in mind. I'm going to read now this last article I want to share with you this morning that has to do with something that seemed to be unrelated, but the article explains itself. Again, written by Tom Philplot over there in Mother Jones. And it's entitled, "A Nasty Swine Flu in China Means Big Trouble for U.S. Farmers." Not for the reason you think, which is, I say, it's a roundabout thinking, but it's very interesting. A relentless rainy spring and President Donald Trump's trade war with China aren't the only forces haunting the Midwest corn and soybean farmers. A deadly, highly contagious disease called African swine fever, thankfully harmless to humans, is sweeping through China's hog farms, literally killing demand for feed. African swine fever has already wiped out at least 20% of the nation's hog herd this year, according to the Dutch agricultural lender Rabobank. That amounts to about 90 million pigs, more than the entire U.S. hog population. The globe's second largest behind China. So America is number 2 behind China to produce hogs or to raise hogs. That's bad news for American farmers, because China imports large quantities of our soybeans. China houses nearly 60% of the entire globe's pig herds and fatten nearly 500 million pigs for slaughter every year. Requires it to import 2/3 of all global traded soybeans. So I don't want you to miss that. I don't know if you heard it, but I want to say it to you again. China, the number 1 producer of pigs or hogs, houses 60% of the entire globe's pig herd. So 6 out of 10 pigs exist in China, which is unbelievable. And fatten nearly 500 million pigs for slaughter every year requires to import 2/3 of all the globe's soybeans. So 2/3. That means most of the soybeans being produced is heading to China to feed pigs. So America, as you know, is one of the biggest, largest. They do so much soybeans, and a lot of it is needed for China to raise hogs. And they already killed 20% of the hogs in China because of the swine flu or African swine flu. The problem will likely linger, we hold the view that it will take over 5 years for China pork production to recover fully from the African swine flu, says Rabo Bank notes. That's because there's no cure or vaccine for it. The only way to stop the ASF, which is the African swine flu, is to kill all exposed pigs and impose draconian sanitation measures. The virus moves easily among pigs and can travel great distance in contaminated feed and equipment, workers' clothing and shoes, feral swines and ticks. It has already spread to Mongolia, Cambodia, North Korea, South Korea, Vietnam, and the western parts of Europe. So this thing is spreading from China, not from Africa, I guess. The United States have so far managed to avoid this plague, but the United States Department of Agriculture is on high alert. In recent months, it has rolled out a surveillance system and is actively preparing to respond to ASF wherever detected in U.S., the agency reported in May. In April, a U.S. pork trade group canceled its annual World Pork Expo in Des Moines, Iowa, citing an abundance of caution and fear that attendees from ASF positive regions over there in Asia and some parts of Europe might carry the disease to the United States on their clothing. I just add the clothing part. But China's struggles with the infection is already roiling the U.S. Farm Belt. Fewer pigs to fatten in China translate to less need for feed. The U.S. agricultural lender CoBank estimates that the swine fever crisis means China will import about 15% less soybean over the next year than it would have with the swine fever crisis. Soybean demand would be lower still if China authorities weren't responding to the pig shortage by ramping up production of other soy-eating meat sources, mainly chicken, CoBank notes. So I might pause there again and just say this. So notice here, because I don't want you to miss this, I don't want to mentally miss this. So China is already figuring out, hey, look, we have a problem here because America is hitting us with embargoes. We need to figure out how to raise more chickens. I guess they're like that company. So eat chicken, don't eat beef. So they're eating chicken instead of whatever. They could just eat tofu and call it a day. ASF represents yet another setback for U.S. soybean farmers, but it's a potential boom to the other meat industry. China will have to import more meat, including chicken, to make up for the domestic pork shortfall. U.S.-based meat giant Tyson Foods, a massive producer of pork, chicken, and beef, is licking its chops, literally. China ASF woes offer a significant upside to our pork business, while also lifting the chicken and beef business as substitutes, says CEO Noel White wrote in the May 9, 2019 note. The industry is already cashing in, even though China maintained a 62% tariff on U.S. pork as part of a trade war. It's bought 143,000 metric tons of it in the first 3 months in 2019, almost 5 times as much as it imported in the entire year of 2018. So it's a massive problem. The stock price of Tyson almost 5 times as much. The stock price of Tyson and chicken giant Pilgrim Pride and Sanderson Farm have all surged up to 40% in 2019, driven in part by speculation that U.S. meat production will benefit from the spread of the African swine flu. If the U.S. meat industry does get a major export boost from ASF in Asia and Europe, that will ultimately be good news for the Midwest farmers, who will be well positioned to supply the feed. But the impact on soybean and corn price will likely be mute, CoBank says. The ASF crisis appeared to be accelerating a trend among Chinese consumers to eat less pork and more chicken. And chicken is more feed efficient, meaning it requires less soybean and corn per pound than pork. Of course, ASF doesn't manage to jump the ocean and take root in U.S. hog farms. Corn and soybean price would tumble anew. So, in addition to the climate chaos that's soaking their field at planting time and the potential chaos that pinching their foreign markets, the Midwest farmers are feeling the squeeze from a virulent animal disease spreading on the other side of the world. So that's something new and ongoing that is going to that is affecting already global price, as they say, Pilgrim's Pride, the pride of the Pilgrims, back how many 100 years ago, Sanders Farm, and Tyson's Chicken. They're doing well, 40%. That's a massive jump in their value because of this African swine, ASF, African swine flu that is happening in Asia. Now it's already in western parts of Europe. And if it jumps, the what the article covered itself is a problem. So, because China imports less, we call it soybeans, this gonna knock the American farmers. So they're losing money all kind of ways. And now they are doing chicken, but chicken feeds on less corn and soy to develop. So that is a problem in itself. That's a new problem. But you can see how things can switch up real fast, because if there's that problem and something like a swine flu, because we have not really experienced anything major in North America when it comes on to any type of flu, whether it be affecting livestock or human beings, in quite a few years. I think the last thing happened was swine flu quite a while ago. It's been kind of quiet on the endemic front. The biggest thing that was in the news was Ebola, but even yesterday I was reading, they says Ebola is not a international crisis at the moment. It's still centered in Congo, and partly because the ignorance there, and also the wars that are going on there. So that's not a problem. So we haven't got a problem like this, but this is a new problem, which is the swine flu, a flu amongst the pigs, the hogs. And this here is wiping out the farms wiping out the pig farming in China. I think 20% so far. That's not wipe out, but it's affecting them. And because of this is happening, so you can see how something like this could create more problem, because that would create more problem, because if you could create more food problem. I see how quick things can move and get out of hand. That's why it's important to watch what's going on, and it's important to take note, because as I say, been wondering about this, but all of a sudden now there's a new problem, because remember, it's all food, and if one food source dry up or there's a problem, people just turn to another source. That's good for as I say, the chicken growers, because now people are going to eat more chicken, and they're going to eat less pork. But that's a food imbalance that's going to go on, because it's just what people eat. And you solely, as I say, take one or two more things, and then all of a sudden, they're eating more chicken, but now it's just less food period on the market, which is my problem, which is what I'm highlighting here. So what does that mean for you and I? It means it's good, when your diet is what it is, because remember, it takes more food to be able to create meat than it is to eat the meat, eat the plants itself, and then you create your own protein internally. It's cheaper, and it's more environmentally friendly. It's safer, because you reduce the chance of getting disease, foodborne illnesses from the animals. So to me, it's an important thing to contemplate, to consider a plant-based diet, number one. It's important to contemplate food security, because as I'm noted here, that how quickly things can turn sour real fast, and you could have problems with food, where if you asked me a year ago, the thought wasn't even in my mind. It was just not weren't there. But you asked me even 3 months ago, I was like, the largest agricultural disaster in American history. That's significant. But as I said, there's a lot of farms. But then all this rain creating problems, the trade wars creating problems. And you could just add one or two more things like a hurricane, some more fires, or you could add a swine flu that start devastating the pig industry. And then that's just less food, because food is food, whether or not you're vegan, vegetarian, or a paleo, or meat eater. It's just food source. What else does it mean to me also is that, as we know, we're told that as we get closer to the end of time, that there's going to be problems with temporal prosperity. There's going to be a problem with the animal industry, because the animals are diseased. And the disease in the animal, they spread to human beings. Even though the swine flu is not spreading to human beings. But remember, it only takes one mutation and it'll jump the barrier. But separate from that, we're talking about food safety, food security. So it's always important to note that you can eat a very simple diet. To note that sometimes if you have a little piece of land, they can grow something. At least get used to growing something, just in case. You have to go put something in the ground. And, recently I've been doing some of that, and I've been really thinking about doing some more. Because as I say, it's just good to be able to have certain foods. The other thing that I have an issue with food security is all the foods that we eat, especially if they're imported. They're foods that have, if it's not locally grown, they're foods that have been dipped in, if it's fruits, it's been dipped in hot water and or irradiated. If it's regular food, if it's not organic and so forth, for the most part, it is herbicide, pesticide, and also irradiated, especially if it's coming from abroad. And so it's just always good to try to get the best source of food and to be able to know that you can survive on a very simple diet. So if things goes awry, that you can still eat. The person is going to be in the biggest trouble is people who are primarily meat eaters, because they're going to be, they're the first domino to tumble, because they're more dependent upon food, secondhand food, because they have to first take the soybean, and instead of eating it, or eating some derivative like tofu or whatever from the soybean, or take the corn and eat it, they have to feed the corn to the animal, and the animal expend all that energy to develop a pound of flesh, and then they eat the pound of flesh. But if there's a problem, those prices will go up, and then you will have a problem. Think about what's going on in China now. That, as it says, China imported so many tons of meat in the first 6 months of the year. That is more than what they imported in all of 2018, and they paid more for it under an embargo. So that's driving up the price. So when you have a commodity that is becoming short or less, and you have more people want it, but it's less of it, then it's higher price. But you have to raise the soybean, raise the corn, or grow the soybean, grow the corn, feed it to the animals, then buy the animals at a more expensive price. So when you have these type of trade wars and stuff like that, the people suffer. The president is not going to suffer. The president of China, or whatever you call him, premier, they're not going to suffer. It's the regular people that's suffering, because they're the one that is going to pay the heavy price. That price is going to be passed on to the regular people. They don't win. So I know they turn into chicken. So I'm saying to you, it's good to have a diet. It's good to be able to practice at least, or to grow a little thing or two. And watch that type of stuff and eat a diet that is, as I say, at least, there's enough soybean to go around, more than enough to go around to feed you and I, if needs be. It's going to be problems with the animal. Because the animals, again, swine flu, if that thing jump over, then we have a crisis. So watch that, and we close with that. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you for the blessings of your word, for the blessings, dear Lord, of telling us to watch and to always be sober and be diligent, knowing, dear Lord, that we have an adversary seeking to destroy. May you bless us, dear Lord, that we might be wise in our choices, especially when it comes on to our diet. and our choice is to serve thee. Be with us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you again live tomorrow morning, where we should talk about current events. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.